All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight as we discuss immunological conditions and what it's like to live with them. So, a couple disclaimers as well are that what we discuss tonight is not medical advice. For that, we recommend that you consult your doctor if you have any medical concerns. And each person with the condition is going to have their own unique experiences, even among people with the same diagnosis. And we are by no means experts on these topics, but the guest speakers we have tonight who you're going to be hearing from are experts on their personal experiences with these conditions. And with that, we're going to get right into talking about immunological conditions. So immune disorders cause excessive, deficient, or inappropriate immune responses, and they're caused by genetics, infection, or environmental triggers. Treatments include medications, immunotherapy, and lifestyle changes. Family, history, age, environmental factors are all some risk factors. And there are several types of immune conditions, such as autoimmune, immunodeficiency, hypersensitivities, and some complications can also include severe infections, organ damage, and chronic illness. So we're going to be talking about two immune conditions. One of them is common variable immunodeficiency, or CVID. So it's a primary immunological condition that causes low levels of serum antibodies, which can lead to increased susceptibility to infection. And while the causes are unknown, it's believed to be genetic. Symptoms can include recurrent infections, GI malabsorption, and treatments include immunoglobulin replacement therapy. And 1 in 25,000 to 50,000 people experience CVID, and complications can include lung damage, autoimmune disorders, and higher risk of cancers. Now, we're also going to be talking about human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. This is a secondary immunological condition where a chronic viral infection attacks the immune system, and it can be caused by anal or vaginal sex, sharing needles, or childbirth. The symptoms can be flu-like, weight loss, or mouth ulcers, and treatments include antiretroviral therapy, which can treat the side effects. And 40.9 million people worldwide contracted HIV in 2025, and complications for this include infections, cancers, and progression to AIDS if not treated properly, and this can be potentially fatal. So now I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie to introduce our guest speakers.
All right. Thank you so much to our guest speakers tonight for volunteering their time and sharing their experiences with us. Before I get into them, I'll introduce myself. I'm Stephanie. I'm one of the co-founders and co-presidents of Invisible Illness Awareness Network. I'm a white woman with long brown hair. I'm wearing a gray blazer and a black shirt. Um, and without further ado, our first guest speaker is Brady. He's an HIV advocate. You can find him at BradyDale311 on Instagram. And then our second guest speaker is Lily, and she's a CVID advocate. You can find her at lily.honey on Instagram. I should spell both of those probably. Brady is BradyDale311 on Instagram, and Lily is Lillie.HUNNI on Instagram. And thank you both so much for speaking with us tonight. We're really excited to ask you some questions and get to know your lived experiences. So if you guys would also like to introduce yourselves, give a verbal image description, and just a little bit of background on you, we'd love to hear it.
My name is Lily, as Stephanie said. I am a white woman. I have blonde hair currently back in a bun, and I'm wearing kind of a rustish orange shirt. And I've got my background blur, but you can kind of see some plants behind me as well. She, her pronouns, and in my day life, I am a development writer for an environmental nonprofit. I'm based out in Seattle. And in addition to advocating for CVID awareness in patients, I also talk about plasma donation, which is the treatment that has helped me so much and helped me get back to my life after my CVID onset. Over to Brady.
Thank you, Lily. Hi, everyone. My name is Brady Dale Etzcorn Morris. Everyone calls me Brady Dale. I am an HIV advocate based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I am a white man with blonde and white hair, and a very white beard, and I am sitting tonight in front of my library den. I've got my books and my bookcases behind me. Um, in my HIV advocacy, I have advocated on the local, state, federal, and international stages, trying to help improve the quality of life for people living with HIV. When I first started in my advocacy work, I had no idea the intersections that I would encounter through my advocacy work. So I just want to help lift up other people living with HIV. And at the end of the day, my biggest thing that I inspire to do is just provide hope. And I will turn it back over to y'all.
All right, Morgan, do you want to do a quick description of yourself as well before we get started?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan. I am a volunteer with IIN. I am a white woman with long, dark brown hair that's currently in a bun, and I'm wearing a navy t-shirt, and my background is blurred here as well. I'll also be participating in the discussion tonight, along with Stephanie to kind of guide some of the questions and conversation. So nice to meet you both, and thank you both for being here.
All right. Our first question is, can you both please share your experience with living with your invisible illness, chronic illness, and disability? And things you might want to talk about include when did you first start experiencing symptoms? What symptoms do you have? And brief description about how your condition affects you in your day-to-day life. Either of you can start.
All right. Thank you, Lily. All right, for me, I was diagnosed with AIDS in 2009. And for me, back then, I did not know who to turn to or where to turn. And it set down a really dark path. Drugs, alcohol, and it took me several years to finally come to terms with my diagnosis. And when I finally, through the help of friends and family, once I was able to get back on my feet, I decided I don't want anyone else to ever have to go through what I went through, to have to go through those dark days. And so I, since then, have dedicated my life to wanting to help other people who are newly diagnosed, people who may have been diagnosed for a long time, have questions, helping. A lot of folks need help like navigating the healthcare systems, insurance, things like that. It's nearly impossible to understand. So helping people not only have access to treatment, but being able to maintain that access to treatment. All those different facets is what I have kind of blossomed my advocacy into. And as I was discussing a little bit before we started tonight, I am amazed by some of the rooms that I have been in as an HIV advocate. I have sat across the table from health ministers and whatnot, but there were always still rooms in which decisions were being made about people living with HIV, and no one living with HIV was in that room. And the only thing holding me back was a degree. So I decided I'm getting my degree so I can sit in those rooms and help provide a better voice for people living with HIV, so it can help shape better policy, and we can help improve the life of people living with HIV. Because funny thing is when we improve the life of people not only living with HIV, we also improve the lives of other people living with other diseases. So it is a win-win for everyone.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's great, Brady. And so much of that resonates with me and kind of my experiences navigating the healthcare system and trying to figure out if something was wrong, if what was wrong, and since my diagnosis as well, just accessing healthcare and trying to kind of demystify that system. And I imagine many of us on this call have experienced that firsthand. So I think that is really important. For CVID, in my experience, it began when I was in late middle school, early high school with just starting to get sick more easily than my peers. I started to notice I was always the one with the cold, or I had a flu that would last way longer than the other students in my class. And from there, it kind of gradually escalated over the course of about 15 years before I was diagnosed. My main problem for many years was that I was having really bad stomach problems. I was seeing a lot of GI doctors and trying to check off, some of the normal things that they check for in that system. But at the same time, I was also dealing with repeated infections, infections that wouldn't clear on their own and required antibiotics, and pneumonia, bronchitis, and a lot of other things that kind of my campus health doctors were a little bit, uh, mystified by and didn't quite know what to do with. So those two things were being treated separately for a long time. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that the pieces kind of fit together with my CVID diagnosis. Um, right after I was diagnosed, about a month after, I started immunoglobulin replacement therapy, which is made from plasma donation, plasma donors. And since then, my issues, my symptoms have been much less severe. In particular, right up to my diagnosis and kind of in the worst time of my CVID symptoms, I was really fatigued. I had lost a lot of weight and a lot of energy, and I'd kind of had to give up on most of my life. I wasn't able to work full time anymore. I definitely wasn't able to run or hike or climb or do any of the things that I moved out to the Pacific Northwest for. And those have kind of gradually come back to me over the last 2 years. So I think similar to Brady, I am definitely trying to spread a little bit of hope by talking about my experience in showing people that are newly diagnosed that there is a better future available through IG replacement therapy. And many people with CVID do fantastically well on IG therapy. And also just in showing people that aren't chronically ill that there's something that they can do to help other people. And it's kind of this altruistic thing that I didn't really know much about prior to my diagnosis, but plasma donation is something that, many of our family and friends can do. And just a way to have a positive impact in the world. So those are some of the things that motivated me to start talking about it. And yeah, I'm very lucky to have responded well to treatment and be much healthier today as I sit here.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lily. I am also very happy to hear that treatment has been successful for you. And I love how both you and Brady are using your platforms to, not only just, the change for your conditions itself, but as you mentioned, for society as a whole and other illnesses and advocating for, plasma donation and policy changes. So that's so amazing to hear from the both of you. Our next question here is about your journey to getting diagnosed. So I guess we're curious to hear a little bit about how long maybe it took you to start seeking help after you started noticing your symptoms. How long and how many doctors did that take to eventually get diagnosed? And also what your emotional reaction to that diagnosis may have been. And we can start with either of you.
I can start with this one. I feel like I answered some of this in the previous questions. I can build off of what I said earlier, 15 years from onset to diagnosis, somewhere about 15 years. And I honestly don't think I could tell you how many doctors I saw in that period of time. I know I saw like 5 GI doctors in various states, and other primary care doctors, lots of campus health doctors. And yeah, not sure that I could really come up with a number, but definitely too many and more than I would have liked to see. Um, a particular nugget that I like to mention here is I had the same test result when I was 19 that was irregular that eventually led to my diagnosis at 28. So if the doctor that I had seen at 19 paid attention, I would have had my diagnosis almost 10 years earlier. So definitely experienced this gap in recognition and acknowledgement of what I was experiencing. I was told a lot by the doctors I was seeing that I must just be stressed, that they couldn't really find anything wrong with me, and was mostly prescribed like stress management and meditation and things of that nature, which was really frustrating. And I think led to the just relief and validation that I experienced when I was finally diagnosed. In terms of how long it took to start seeking care, I started pretty early when I started noticing the stomach issues really developing in high school. And it kind of stopped and started after that, because I think when you're seeking a diagnosis for a chronic illness, you have to take breaks and kind of take a step back and decide if what you're currently experiencing is worth, if you can live with it, and maybe try some of the things the doctor suggested and then go back. So I had to kind of restart multiple times when my symptoms escalated. And I will always remember my initial appointment with my immunologist. The first thing he said to me was, "You are not crazy. I think I know exactly what is wrong with you. It's not all in your head. And I think we can fix it." And then, went on to tell me about CVID, and here we are today. So it just goes to show, I think, the impact of like just one provider taking you seriously and listening to what you're saying. And I hope that, by seeing more people talking about chronic illness and hopefully increasing awareness for some of these invisible illnesses, that fewer people will deal with that at the doctor's office, because I know it's a very common experience.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to comment and be like, a lot of our guest speakers have mentioned that. Like they've either been
Yeah.
told like it's in their head, they're diagnosed with a mental illness in conjunction with their eventual diagnosis too. And that certainly has its time and place and moment, but
Yeah.
that's not all that's wrong,
Right.
Thank you for
Exactly.
sharing that.
Yeah. And I was gonna say too, like the way you commented about how, oh, once like it took one doctor to listen to you. Well, it also took one doctor 10 years earlier who didn't notice that.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think that shows how much impact. Like I know a lot of our listeners and people at the affiliate organizations, they are future healthcare providers. They're aspiring to be healthcare providers.
That's
So
amazing.
just to see that you alone can make a huge, huge difference in someone's journey. So I'm glad that
Absolutely.
you did get that provider who did listen to you and validate you and help you in all the ways.
And to know
Me
what
too.
CVID was in order
Yes.
to do so, which is half the
Absolutely.
battle, is like
Yeah.
we want people to be aware of it because maybe that doctor wasn't even aware CVID existed when they looked at your test result when you were 19. Like that's,
Hmm.
part of the battle is bringing awareness to these things, and also having providers that listen and want to help their patients, even, there's a lot of overwhelm in the system sometimes, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Definitely.
and Stephanie, I'm so glad you said that because even with HIV, like HIV has been around in the public discourse now for 40 plus years, and there are still providers out there who have misinformation and are not even up to date on what HIV means today. Because so that kind of leads me into like when I got my diagnosis in 2009, I was a little weird. I never experienced any kind of symptoms like I've heard a lot of other people in my HIV community describe as they seroconverted, like shortly after they were exposed to the virus, they would experience like flu-like symptoms, night sweats, that type thing. I didn't. So I was always the kind that, every 3 to 6 months I would pop to the health department and get an STD test, because I wanted to know, I wanted to be a little bit responsible, and or feel like I had some kind of control. Um, and I just happened to stop at a community event and be like, oh, hey friends, like y'all come on, everybody, we all need to be tested, yada yada. And I really expected, just like every other time, yeah, it's all good. You see you next time. But the community health worker looked at me and they're like, you came back with a preliminary positive. You need to reach out to your primary care physician um, uh, to double check this test result. And I was just like, well, crap. I'm like, dang it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be HIV positive. Went to my healthcare provider, told her they did back then they had to do the ELISA test and a Western and all of that. We didn't have the little like almost instant test that we do today. Um, but after that, they did the blood work. I'm waiting that 2 weeks. The doctor walks in. I'm all ready for her to hear her say, "Yes, Brady, you're HIV positive." But I looked at her and she's holding back tears, and I'm like thinking, WTF? Like, what is going on here? And she's just like, I never thought when I started family practice that I would ever be uttering these words to one of my patients. But Brady, you have AIDS and your T cells, your lymphatic, your immune system is so low right now that a common cold could kill you. And I walked out of that office and sat in my car and just cried. Like I said, earlier, I didn't know who to turn to. Like, when I came out as gay, like a lot of my family's other folks said, like, Brady, you can be gay, but that means you're gonna die of AIDS. And like here I am, sitting here, the trauma of that diagnosis starts to set in, and it's like, oh my God, everything that I've been told, is coming true. And I just started on this, very self-destructive path. Um, but like I said earlier, and what really helped me was in 2016, I found out an HIV advocate began talking about um, how if someone is the viral load is undetectable, they're untransmittable. And I was like, it didn't make sense to me at first, but I came to learn within, shortly thereafter, what he was saying about undetectable equals untransmittable is that those of us living with HIV, if we take effective treatment, we can get our viral load so low that the virus cannot be transmitted sexually. Um, this also prevents vertical transmission. That means from mother to child. But this information was being gatekept by medical providers who did not want to tell people living with HIV this, you know, groundbreaking news about how great treatment is today, because they only wanted to tell the right patients, people who would be, compliant to their treatment. When in fact, those of us living with any kind of disease, we deserve full autonomy. I want to know everything that you know about my virus so that I can then make whatever decisions are best for me. Um, but when I back to when I learned about this for the very first time, when I realized that I could not sexually transmit HIV to any of my sex partners, almost immediately, a lot of the self stigma that I carried from the very day of my diagnosis began to fall away. A lot of the stigma that other people tried to put on me began to fall away. Um, and it literally changed my life, so much so that I got sober. And getting sober in 2016 is part of the reasons why I'm here today. It's part of the reasons why I'm back in school. So everything to my sobriety. But I know how important this message was to me and how much it helped to heal some of the trauma of my HIV and AIDS diagnosis. So knowing the power of the science of U equals U, that is why I want to, any opportunity I get to talk about U equals U, sign me up. I'll be there and I'll be more than happy to talk to anyone about it.
Thank you for sharing that, Brady. That's certainly a lot, and but it's important to talk about. It's important to break the stigma like you're talking about and bring awareness to the fact of all of the things you said. Like, so people have the information that they need to do what's best for them and their journey and their diagnosis, and keep spreading that awareness so they can know how they can live their life to the best of their ability, for certain. Um, and I know you guys have kind of touched on this already, but if you want to explain a little bit more, how has your day-to-day life sort of changed since your symptoms started and since you got a diagnosis? So you can talk about what challenges you face in everyday life. Has your condition taught you anything about yourself, which I know we've all already touched on. Brady went on that a bit. And has your condition influenced your self-view or identity in any way, both good and bad? And I know you guys have both kind of touched on this a little bit already, but if you want to elaborate on any of those points, now would
Sure,
be a
like
great
I
time.
will. Yeah, I said so much. I just like a day to day living with HIV today has very little impact on my life whatsoever. I usually really only think about it at night when I'm popping my pill, unless I am doing some kind of advocacy work. But I am very fortunate that on the backs of long term survivors and people who still to this day suffer from side effects from early treatment. Um, I luckily don't have to go through that today because there is good effective treatment. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Lily.
Thanks, Brady. And yeah, it's somewhat similar over on my end. It's kind of like a canyon is how my symptoms have moved throughout my life. So I guess I should say my functionality is a canyon, my symptoms are a mountain, but um, kind of slow increase in symptoms, slow decrease in functionality over the course of that 15-year period, with like a really sharp drop off at the end when things escalated very quickly. And then since then, I've been kind of climbing out of that canyon thanks to IG therapy. So um, the challenges that I was facing, at the prior to my diagnosis and prior to starting treatment, really just being kind of the pieces of life that I enjoyed, like being inaccessible to me one at a time. And to the point where I was just like so physically fatigued and exhausted that I was not able to really get around the block anymore. And I didn't know if that was just how it was going to be. I was obviously looking for answers at the time, but yeah, I have been really grateful to experience the reverse of that transformation and kind of see my immune system come back to life and like see my side effects and symptoms start to subside. So I do have relatively few issues on the day to day now. I do have some comorbidities that have been kind of developing in the last few years too. So I'm dealing with those more than I'm dealing with CVID at this point. My immune system is functional and well regulated. I do an infusion once a week. That takes about 2 hours. And, I had to learn how to stick myself at home, which I didn't think I would ever do. I was very afraid of needles for many years. Um, and, other than that, yeah, I think things are somewhat back to normal for me. It has really helped, I think, my self identity and just kind of giving myself credit for how resilient I was being without quite even knowing that I was doing that. Um, Partially in terms of fighting for myself and trying to get diagnosis, and then also just now understanding what my body was dealing with, during that time and how much I was going through while trying to like live a normal life and go to work 9 to 5. Like meanwhile, my immune system is non-functional. So I think giving myself a lot more credit for how hard I was working physically without knowing it, emotionally, mentally on the surface, has helped with how I view myself and given me more trust and confidence and patience as well, which has been a big one to learn as I've kind of navigated the ups and downs.
That's so great to hear. And definitely, yes, give yourself, all the praise and all of that because it's so hard. And that's like something we hear with everyone. It's so hard living with these chronic conditions and just trying to get through the system and fight and advocate for yourself for the quality of life and the care that you deserve is beyond ex mentally and physically exhausting. So, as everyone is saying, I'm sure we can all relate to that experience in one way or another. So, thank you for sharing. Um, our next question here, I feel like again, you guys have kind of touched on, so we can definitely skip over it if there's nothing really to add. But it's about the treatments you guys have tried. So basically, what has worked, what hasn't worked. Sounds like we have figured out what works for both of you, which is wonderful. So I don't know if there's anything specifically you want to add to that in context. I like Lily, what you were saying, having to do it once a week. Like I would have never known that. That's so interesting to hear. And I guess what does that look like for you in your lifestyle or Brady, the medicine every day. So yeah.
Yeah, when I was first diagnosed and first started treatment, there were medications that I had to keep refrigerated. So it made traveling and those kind of things really hard. Because I love to go camping and love to do things outdoors, and it's really kind of hard to be outside all the time and keep pills cold. Um, yeah, but luckily, today I am on one pill a day, and I have not tried any of these yet, but there are now injectables. There are now medications that someone can go just in either 4 times a year or twice a year, and it will sustain their HIV treatment, so then they don't even have to take a pill every day. But I am lucky enough, like I take the pill a day.
And for me with CVID, there are kind of two treatment options. So subcutaneous IG therapy is one, that's what I do, and the other is IV IG therapy. IV IG therapy is an IV, so you go typically to an infusion center. And for most people, that's once every 3 or 4 weeks. But the downside of IVIG is that your levels have the chance to kind of get back down. So some people experience more fatigue or they're a little bit more susceptible to infection as that period of immunity starts to wane at the end of your treatment period. So for subcutaneous IG, if you are okay doing it at home and okay doing it once a week, then you're able to maintain a pretty like stable level of immune function. So that's what was recommended to me. Some people have to switch between different brands and do some trial and error to see what works well. I was very lucky. The first one has worked really well for me, and I have not changed since then. And yeah, it's like a little bit of a pain to kind of prep everything. And then, as I mentioned, like at the beginning, I definitely did not think I was going to be able to do the infusions myself and like actually do the sticking of the needle, and all of that really freaked me out for a while. But it's become very normal now. And similarly to Brady, there is some temperature regulation that's needed for SEIG. So it has to be at like a reasonable room temperature. And like right now we're having a heat wave in Seattle, and I have it down in the basement to make sure it stays cold. So just a little bit of kind of keeping an eye on it with that. And yeah, a little bit of a pain when I have to travel to kind of like carry it all with me and everything. But it's, I think, all a reasonable price to pay to be healthy at this point.
For sure. And it's all about like adjusting to your new normal and figuring out what
Mm-hmm.
works best with your new routines and everything. And it can be a very big adjustment period for people. It depends upon, all the different treatments you tried. Like Brady, like you now transition to the pill and you don't have to worry about keeping things cold necessarily. So it's, a lot of trial and error, a lot of adjusting to a new normal and making that part of your, everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've both kind of touched on this question already, but maybe it's not the most impactful. What has been your most impactful experience regarding your condition, whether it be good or bad? Um, you both shared some things, like Lily, you mentioned like how your um, immunologist, is that the correct one, who like finally recognized your diagnosis and
Mm-hmm.
saw that test result? Um, I don't want to say that was the most impactful. Was that the most impactful experience for you? Or has there been something else that you've learned in this process, whether it be about yourself or anything else that is impactful?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely the turning point in my, journey, if you will. I think the other thing that I would mention is like the various community spaces that exist for even these rarer diseases like CVID. There is this amazing Facebook page, like there's social media creators, there are places to kind of go to for help, and Facebook is really the big one for CVID. And just like going on there and seeing everybody else posting, hey, I was just diagnosed and like I have no idea what's happening. Can anybody answer these questions that I have? I made one of those posts and got a lot of really wonderful responses, and people share tips and support one another when people are going through a hard time. And yeah, just knowing now that those spaces exist, and also understanding that like I know what page to go to because I have the diagnosis. So I see those two things, like that moment with my immunologist and like getting diagnosed, and having access to those community spaces, as pretty linked, and both very impactful for me.
For me, I cannot stress enough the trauma that came with my HIV diagnosis. And for a long time, my doctors were treating my disease or my virus, but they weren't treating the person. So learning and getting the doctors on board saying like, hey, it's more than just this virus that I have in me. I need help with navigating these other things, stigma, HIV, HIV disclosure laws, and how to navigate those power imbalances that these laws create. I needed help, and so Lily, as you said, one of the things I was at a bar one night and out of desperation was, just yelled out like, there's nobody around to help me, and it just so happened that there was a local HIV advocate in the bar that night and, um, came over and talked to me and getting connected to community was I think honestly, the true beginning to my road to recovery, not just in living healthier with HIV, but just also too in helping just begin to heal the mental trauma of my diagnosis that was not healed, you know, back in 2009 when I was first diagnosed.
No, you both made excellent points with that. Like, community is a really big thing. It's not that obviously, you don't want more people to have the condition that you're dealing with, right? It's just having someone else who knows similar things of what you're going through and what steps you have to take to get back to your new normal, like I mentioned. It's knowing that you're not alone in the process, that there are other people just like you going through similar things, and even across things like even across chronic illness, invisible illness. It's like a lot of people who experience different things, like both of you experience very different conditions, but you have a lot of similar experiences together with that. Like, you go through the same motions of, getting diagnosed, finding your new normal, coming to terms with that, finding a community that uplifts you and supports you and helps you get into your new normal. And that's why we kind of created this organization, to bring people together to see, like, we're not that different. It's like, oh, there's a lot of commonalities within that. And just, making a supportive community overall, bringing a lot of different conditions together. Um, but yeah, thank you both for sharing that. That's really, community is like a foundational component of this. And hopefully we've helped a little bit in that way. And I'm glad that you have your own communities to uplift you and help you with your diagnoses.
Yeah, and especially with you guys being leaders in your communities as well. That is amazing, and it's so great to have you kind of speak on that perspective here as well. So thank you for doing that. The next question here is about challenges you have faced within the healthcare system, education system, workplace, about barriers or lack of support in those spaces. So, if you've experienced any stigma, discrimination, medical gaslighting, accessibility, I know it's a lot of big topic here, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit. But if there's anything in particular, that sticks out to you as an experience that you've had in that context.
Yeah, I can go first for this one. Um, I think medical gaslighting, like, yes, 100%. I have a newer provider who has started calling it that, and it has been very impactful for me to like recognize, yeah, that's what I was experiencing. That's what it's called when somebody tells you that you're fine for many years. But I think I've touched on kind of what that looked like and felt like. And I think the other thing that's just kind of an unexpected and I'm very lucky to have a really supportive workplace, a really supportive team. I have a disability community within my organization. I'm just like blessed beyond words and all of those things. But in the healthcare system, I just have been surprised that I routinely am explaining my condition to providers. Most of my providers outside of immunology don't know what CVID is. They're not familiar with immune deficiencies. They think I have an autoimmune disease. So just some of that like provider education, I think overcoming, kind of getting past the previous phase of medical gaslighting has equipped me well to be able to advocate for myself and know the scripts and kind of what I need to communicate to new providers. But you just have to be hyper vigilant, I think. And I still worry when I present with something new that I'm not going to be taken seriously. And I have, experienced that with some of these comorbidities. So it's frustrating, and I think I can keep learning, and hopefully the system can keep getting better at the same time, and maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I don't want to berate the point, but for me, it was, stigma. And for me, stigma, I don't think we talk enough about how suffocating stigma can be and how stigma um, can result in the end of life if it's not if appropriate safeguards aren't in place, or if someone's not connected, if you don't have the resource, if you don't have any kind of support, um, stigma can be deadly. Um, and I know it, and it's not always too, like I said, the stigma that outside society puts on us, but also the stigma that we kind of put on ourselves when we're diagnosed. Uh, because I know a lot of people. I know when I was first diagnosed, a lot of folks saw my HIV diagnosis as kind of like a moral compass, like, oh, he did da 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 da, so that's why he has that. Instead of just seeing HIV as a human condition, that it's not just a gay man's disease. It's literally an epidemic around the world. So yeah, just to bring back to that, the stigma is something we all need to address, and things like this is why I love to do things like this, because it helps educate people, and the more people know, the more we're able to combat misinformation with facts.
For sure. And that ties into our next question very well. Brady, like what's a misconception about your condition that you've encountered and how can we challenge that? I think you've really talked about that so far. Is there anything else you want to add to that point?
Just the old thing, like, it has gotten better, but just to know that HIV can't be transferred from toilet seats. It can't be transferred by sharing eating utensils. It can't be transmitted by sharing drinking utensils. HIV can only be transmitted through bodily fluids, and sometimes mother to child. But but that's it, and that's it.
Thank you for sharing that. Lily, is there a misconception about CVID that you'd like to address in a few sentences?
Um, I think the basic one is that people think it's COVID somehow, just because of the abbreviation. So I'm explaining often, no, it's not related to COVID. It's not long COVID. It's a separate, very real issue that people have. And it just comes with education and yeah, spreading word about these less known diseases.
Yeah, something comes back to like knowledge is power. Without, knowing what we know about our conditions, we can't apply it to our everyday lives. We can't find different treatment options. There, research can't be done. There's a lot of power in having knowledge about your condition.
Definitely. Our next question here is about advice that you would give someone who is newly diagnosed. And I know this is probably, especially for Brady, being an advocate, you can go on and on and on about this. And I'm sure you are very helpful for the patients and everything. And I'd love to hear about that. But since we are trying to wrap up here, we can keep it about 1 to 2 sentences. But again, what is something you would tell someone who is newly diagnosed with your condition?
And be like, it's heavy today, but find your community and they will help carry the load with you.
I love that. That's amazing. And I feel like it's so versatile too. Lily, is there anything for you?
Yeah, in addition to community, I think sharing the hope that comes with treatment and letting them know that treatment is effective for a lot of people. So wherever they are when they get their diagnosis, hopefully that is like the low point and they can start to improve from there.
Wonderful. And something I work in a hospital. I work with some patients and it's very hard for people when they're struggling with whatever condition they're dealing with and seeing themselves like in the present moment and not being able to see instant progress necessarily. It's like it's hard to see where you're going and how far you've come without like another starting point. It's like everyone starts somewhere and maybe right now is your starting point, but you will see progress over time. It will you will it might be slow and steady, but you'll find over time, like you guys have been sharing your experiences and journeys over like years long of time. And I'm sure a lot of people have the experience of looking back at 10-year-old self. You couldn't imagine where you are today. And it's like there's so many things and more, you know, newer technology, newer research, like Brady, you mentioned like changing into different medications, and Lily, you mentioned just having you had your same test results, but more knowledge maybe has been spread about CVID for people to be able to recognize it. And that stuff takes time too. So just having everything kind of come all together is super important. Um, is there anything else that you guys would like the public to know or medical providers to know or just basically anyone for any reason to know about your conditions and or just experiencing chronic illness, invisible illnesses in general?
I have failed to mention I think, most important statistic about primary immune diseases, which is that estimated 70 to 90% of people with PI diseases don't know that they have one. So I think for both medical professionals and the public, that is just good to know. I want medical professionals looking for this. I want people to go and asking about this because it's a lot more common than is currently known, and maybe not as rare as it's currently believed to be.
Just to kind of go back to what I said earlier, is just to remind healthcare providers to get out of their tunnel vision, and instead of just coming in to try to figure out the mystery of a diagnosis, there's a whole else human being that comes with that. So treat all of us, or all of the person that I am, and not just the diagnosis. And again, at the end of the day, there is hope. Because I don't think there's anything sadder in this world than a human being who has given up hope. And so if you are getting close to that point, I'm here. There are other people there. Do not let that spark go out.
That's so important. Thank you so much, Brady, for saying that. And thank you, Lily, for saying that too. Thank you so much for being here. We couldn't do what we do without guest speakers like you guys, people who are willing to share and speak up about their stories and be willing to spread awareness and pass on knowledge to more people. Because, like you all mentioned, like that's the goal, is to help other people so they don't have to go through the same things that we've gone through, right? It's to make everyone's journey a little bit easier as time goes on. Um, but thank you both for, again, being here tonight. We really appreciate it. And we do this every month. We have events every month on different things. So next month in July, we're going to be focusing on neurological conditions. Same place right here, same time as what we started tonight, just on Wednesday, July 22nd, is our next meeting. And then in August, we're going to be focusing on gastrointestinal conditions. Again on Wednesday, August 19th, same place, same time. And we would love for people to join. Sometimes we have guest speakers come back and be part of the audience for next time. So we always welcome everyone, whatever your knowledge level, whatever your condition is. Like we've talked about tonight, there's a lot of commonalities and things that people experience with invisible and chronic illnesses that are very similar. And it's a big community space where we can all come together and kind of talk about those similarities, but also the differences, and learn from each other and their experiences. So if you don't already, please follow us on social media at invisible_illness_network. We post about a lot of different conditions each week, and different awareness days, different awareness months, all that fun stuff. And we do have an Instagram dedicated to the Invisibly Aware series itself, Invisibly_aware_series. And we do record these guest speaker meetings and post them on YouTube in subsequent months. So you can find all of our old videos on YouTube with all of our wonderful guest speakers. And our website, IIAnetwork.org, has a lot more information, as well as our newsletter sign up to remind you to come to these meetings, and other information and resources. Just a lot of fun stuff on that QR code if you want to scan it for our link tree. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, either for our guest speakers or for us tonight, we'd love to hear them in the chat. You can message us directly. But anyway, thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight, all of our volunteers, all of our wonderful audience members, and most of all, our guest speakers for making tonight possible. We really appreciate your time and expertise and your willingness to share with us tonight.
Yes, thank you so much, both of you. It was wonderful to hear your short stories and have you share your experiences.